All right, everybody, I'm back here with another series called The War on Men. Of course, that is not an original title these days. I think there's even been a book or two written with the exact same title, but I'm going to steal it here. So my last series, which I'm going to keep on adding to, I've got 7 parts so far, but I'm going to take a break from it and pivot here a little bit. I think it's appropriate at this juncture, and as I come across more things and more things occur to me, I'll add back on to the other series, kind of go back and forth. But the last series, of course, was on debunking the historical narrative that women had always been oppressed. And of course, it is from that narrative that we have gotten a war on men and a virulently anti-male, especially white Christian heterosexual male, but you can extend that to masculinity in general. And it's probably not new to most of my listeners, subscribers, that this is the state of affairs. The reason I want to do this series is to show the minutia of a lot of things, and hopefully you will learn a lot of facts that I didn't know of over the years, bit by bit, of the outright egregious slander and lies that have been institutionalized against masculinity that really impacts you in a way that's going to help you navigate these minefields, these politically correct minefields of today. And I want it to be known, and I think I've said it already more than once, but I'll keep on saying it in these series. This is not at all if people want to paint someone like myself as this is criticizing women and the behavior of women, not in any way, shape, or form. This is to illustrate that this is an agenda put down by the powers that be above us all. It is a psychological operation. It is akin to brainwashing, and they have targeted the women to put them against the men to destroy our society. So it is hopefully going to be tools, lessons that one can use if you're a female to what to watch out for, so you don't fall victim of these narratives and then begin acting in toxic ways that are going to hurt your relationships, hurt the men around you, etc. And for the men to be on guard against it, help their women in defending themselves against these narratives, and also to protect themselves. Don't simp. Have clarity. I find that that's what, getting down into the details, as they say, the devil is in the details, getting down into the details and showing you just how deep the rot has gotten really impacts you in a way to give you a certain type of clarity and strength, so you know how to act and stay firm in your convictions. So anyway, enough on that. Let's get to the meat. I'm going to start with a clip here from the Red Pill documentary. This was a documentary that was released in 2017. I would highly recommend anybody that's interested in this issue to watch the whole thing. You can find it on YouTube now for free. It was very, very well done. And here's an excerpt of it. It's about the men's rights movement and the issues that they speak about, and kind of the journey of the filmmaker who started as a feminist making this movie, and by the end of it, she is no longer a feminist. And with what she discovers, it impacts her in a very deep level. And it'll be material for videos in the future of just what she went through, just even trying to get this movie released, which says a lot about our society and really reveals how strong the agenda is, and gives, in my opinion, very, very, I would say, irrefutable evidence that this is an agenda, that this is being controlled by powers that be. There doesn't seem any other way to explain it. But let's go ahead and just get right into the clip, and I think I'm going to break it up there and make a comment in the middle, and then we'll take it from there.
In the United States, there are over 2,000 domestic violence shelters. All of them serve female victims, and nearly all of them turn away male victims. In fact, as of 2016, there's only a single domestic violence shelter for men. My initial reaction was that there needed to be thousands more women's shelters because that many more women are being battered. But as it turns out, 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men will be victims of physical violence by an intimate partner in their lifetime. Sure, there's a slight majority of female victims, but how can that excuse denying men help? Couldn't this be considered gender discrimination? Think of it this way. Roughly 78% of all suicides are men. If suicide prevention services only served men, wouldn't we see the gender discrimination immediately? If there are over 2,000 women's shelters that turn away men, and only 1 shelter for men, obviously the resources don't match the need.
How are you involved in the men's rights movement?
Well, from the very beginning, when I first opened the Refuge, which was in 1971 in Chiswick in London, almost as soon as I took the women in, I got a house for men.
A Voice for Men's editor-at-large, Erin Pizzey, founded the first ever women's shelter in 1971, and she is widely revered in the men's rights community.
Because you see, what I knew from the beginning, most domestic violence is consensual. Both are involved. Sometimes one's the perpetrator, the other plays the victim, then it crosses over. It's not as though it's just all men or all women. It's both, and occasionally innocent victims, very innocent.
Battered children grow up to batter, that's what I learnt, whether it be a man or a woman. And I now know that if a woman comes in with a history of violence in her own childhood, the chances are she will be probably violent to her children, and she will want to live on this knife edge of crisis and danger.
I haven't been allowed to speak. That's the difficulty.
Why is that?
Because I'm completely barred from all conferences. I'm not allowed to walk up the step of my own refuge. I bought the bloody building. But no, because there's feminists. The woman who runs it is a very heavy feminist. She won't have anything to do with me.
What did you say that made them hate you?
That women could be equally as violent as men. That was from the beginning.
Okay, I want to add a little bit more detail to this Miss Erin Pizzey there. So did you catch that at the end of that interview there? She asks her, Cassie asks her, so what did you do to make them hate you? And she says, well, I just said that women could be equally as violent as men. Well, hating her doesn't even do it justice. What we have here is a screenshot of her Wikipedia page. So let me just get right to it. Okay, backlash, threats, and harassment. In 1981, Pizzey moved to Santa Fe, New Mexico while targeted by harassment, death threats, bomb threats, and defamation campaigns, and dealing with overwork, near collapse, cardiac disease, and mental strain. In particular, according to Pizzey, the charity Scottish Women's Aid made it their business to hand out leaflets claiming that she believed that women invited violence and provoked male violence. She stated that the turning point was the intervention of the bomb squad, who required all of her mail to be processed by them before she could receive it as a controversial public figure. Having moved to Santa Fe to write, Pizzey promptly became involved in running a refuge in New Mexico, as well as dealing with sexual abusers and pedophiles. Pizzey said of this work, I discovered that there were just as many women pedophiles as there were men. Women go undetected, as usual. Working against pedophiles is a very dangerous business. While living in Santa Fe, one of her dogs was shot and 2 others were stolen, which she claims was a result of racist neighbors. Her family suffered new harassment following the publication of her 1982 book, Prone to Violence. Pizzey thinks much of the harassment to militant feminists and their objections to her research, links much of the harassment. Sorry once again, my reading is not that great here. Links much of the harassment to militant feminists and their objections to her research finding and work. Describing the harassment, Deborah Ross of The Independent wrote that the feminist sisterhood went bonkers. Following the abuse and threats in Santa Fe, she moved to Cayman Islands, where she wrote with her second husband, Jeff Shapiro. Subsequently, she moved to Siena, Italy, where her writing and advocacy work continued. She returned to London in the spring of 1997, homeless due to debt and increasingly poor health. Her insights are still sought by politicians and family pressure groups. just floored me. Amazing. Amazing. So they're trying to kill her for years. Did any of you all listen to this? Did you know about this? Because I don't know hardly any regular normie person that knows any of this. The damn woman that established the first domestic violence shelter to help women became the subject of the target of feminist terrorism, had to flee for her life and go into hiding repeated times. And even still, although they pulled out all the stops to try to defame her in the worst possible way, it's the last sentence. Her insights are still sought by politicians and family pressure groups. So a lot of people know the truth, and that this woman was speaking the truth. And even still, her name is mud. She has to live in hiding. She can't even enter in the refuge that she established. Just something else. Let's continue.
Erin Pizzey says that 62 of the first 100 women to enter her refuge were just as violent as the men they left, and violent towards their children.
But there's levels of violence, isn't there? I deny the fact that I'm violent.
Well, I'm violent.
So am I.
You know, I'm very violent. Well, verbally, and I could quite easily hit somebody. You know, very, very easily. And I've had an argument.
But the feminists I've met have an entirely different take on domestic violence.
On the whole issue of domestic violence, that's just another word, really. It's a cleanup word about wife beating, because that's really what it is, or dating violence. And it's not girls that are beating up on boys, it's boys that are beating up on girls and using violence to intimidate and to control. And we have very few what's called domestic violence shelters, which are places that women can leave their home with their children and get a new start, get out of the violence. But there are not nearly enough of them. We need more funding and more resources, because it is a tremendous disadvantage for women and girls.
In 2014, the CDC released a report revealing that over 5.4 million men and 4.7 million women had been victims of intimate partner physical violence within the previous 12 months. But then why does the media paint domestic violence? Because men are the problem.
I'm going to share with you a paradigm-shifting perspective on the issues of gender violence. I don't see these as women's issues that some good men help out with. In fact, I'm going to argue that these are men's issues. Why is domestic violence still a big problem in the United States and all over the world? What's going on? Why do so many men abuse physically, emotionally, and verbally and other ways the women and girls and the men and boys that they claim to love? What's going on with men?
All right, well, there you have it. Now I'm going to go into a clip from Pearl's show of Just Pearly Things, demonstrating exactly the manifestation of what you just saw in the documentary. And actually, Pearl refers to the documentary using her stats. She kind of dropped the ball a little bit, I thought, because she just says, well, you know, there was a documentary made by Cassie J. But it's very illustrative anyway. You know, she doesn't have the actual studies or can name them, like saying the CDC or for what year, etc. But even still, it's what's so illustrative is that the way that the females on the panel there, well, you can't tell them anything. You'll see. They just dismiss offhand. Women good, men bad. It doesn't matter what data you throw at me, what evidence you can convince me with. That is going to be the narrative, and that's what we're sticking to. Let's take a listen.
Talk about them hitting the guy first. How many? They said there's a lady here in the UK that she worked at women's shelters, and she said 80% of the time the women were equally if not
Yep.
more abusive than the men.
Yep.
But they'll only talk about the man's part in it. Why is that?
Because men are doubly more likely to commit violent crimes. Like, that's the stats.
Against other men.
I'm not going to say anything. I can't
But
say it.
what-
That's a fact. Like, men are doubly more likely to commit violent
they're also
crimes.
more likely to be the victim of violent crimes. So
Yeah,
what does it
in
matter?
a relationship
That's what I'm saying.
anyway.
When it comes to when it comes to abusive relationships, more likely than not, they're hitting each other.
No, I'm going to jump
Both
in
of them.
straight
Both
here.
of them.
And jump in. So mind you, it's publicly knowledge that I was previously in an abusive relationship. So for you to automatically state that, for me, there wasn't any physical violence, but abuse, I feel like we have to openly, since we have this platform, discuss that there's very many different types of abuse. There's emotional, there's coercive control, financially, very different types. It is a gendered crime. Women are far more likely to experience abuse than men will. If we're speaking about violence out on the streets, of course, that's completely different. Women are not out fighting and knifing each other down. But in the home, women, especially in the pandemic, it has increased. And it's
like 70%,
No,
right?
Yeah, it increases-
one-sided. Most abusive relationships are mutual, meaning
But
they're
like
wait,
physical,
let me
what
finish.
type of abuse?
They're usually hitting each other. When it comes to one-sided abuse, it's more likely that the woman's hitting the man and he's not retaliated. And often it goes unreported because there are cases where they even call the police on a woman and they'll still arrest the man.
But where have you got your statistics from? That's my question to you.
They go over it.
It was Twitter.
Cassie,
Yeah.
no, it's not Twitter. It's Cassie J has a whole documentary that goes over it.
That's not a fact. That's just
no,
a
but
documentary.
she pulls up the studies in it. So
That's fine.
You can see
Subjective
it.
studies.
It's not a. It's
All right, so y'all tell me, like in the comments section, is it just me? Really, is it just me, or is the smugness and arrogantness that comes out of a lot of these women when they espouse these opinions just really kind of breathtaking, and like to the level that it's like 100-tier offensive? Like this, the black girl there going on and about it's public knowledge that I was in an abusive. How was it public knowledge you were in an abusive relationship? She goes on to say that she wasn't beaten. Well, it wasn't physical, but it was emotional. It was financial. It was controlling. It was. How many of y'all are hearing these words more and more and more? And without a doubt, is there a-holes out there that count every penny that their woman makes and are complete weirdo control freaks? Without a doubt. But that's not the way it's being sold. Not in my experience at all. I hear these terms thrown around on the daily nowadays of these emotionally abusive and financially abusive, because no, honey, you can't rack up $5,000 on the credit card again this month. Oh, you're trying to control me. I don't know. And just the way that the airhead there at the end, completely dismissed Pearl when she said, no, this is off a documentary. It's not off Twitter. You very rarely get a reaction of like, oh, interesting. Let me follow up on that. Let me, is that true? Is that really true? Let me see, what you're talking about. No, it's just automatic. Nah, those are just biased studies. Like nothing can enter. It's frankly, it's disturbing. But anyway, let's get to hear what I have on the screen. Well, so what I'm going to talk about now to finish off the video is just a couple of examples as to why these women have the attitude that they have. These are things, once again, that I've come across over the years. So the first one I'm going to read from here is a quote from the book called Who Stole Feminism by Christina Hoff Sommers. That was released in 1995. Now, what I'm going to read from here is actually an essay I wrote to somebody in 2015 that I quoted from the book. So I've got a kind of a subnation of what was talked about in the book. The book goes into a lot more detail than I have kind of a little bit of my breakdown and my opinion on it of what you can extrapolate from it. But let's just get right to it and you all can see what you think. In 1993, it was quoted by many major publications, the Boston Globe, Time Magazine, Chicago Tribune, just to name a few, that the March of Dimes had concluded that domestic violence was the largest cause of birth defects in the U.S. Christina Hoff Sommers, in her epic work, Who Stole Feminism, researched this claim and firmly debunked it. She traced the source to a Sarah Buell, a founder of the Domestic Violence Advocacy Project at Harvard Law School, who then went on to head a domestic abuse project in Massachusetts. Miss Buell had obtained the information from Caroline Whitehead, a maternal nurse and child care specialist in Raleigh, North Carolina. Miss Whitehood explained that this information wasn't true, that she had introduced Miss Buell at a speaking engagement where she mentioned that according to some March of Dimes research, they screened for more birth defects than domestic abuse. Supposedly, Miss Buell misunderstood her and put the statement as domestic violence causes more birth defects than anything else into an unpublished manuscript that was circulated amongst family violence professionals. Now, these are my comments afterwards. An honest mistake? Perhaps. But that is pretty hard to believe considering it came from a Harvard scholar. We're talking about birth defects here. Battery responsible for more deaths than all other causes combined? Really? More than genetic disorders such as spina bifida, Down syndrome, Tay-Sachs, sickle anemia? More than alcohol, crack, or AIDS? From what I can tell, there was only one retraction from Time magazine where Hoff Sommers brought the mistake to their attention. The other publications, I don't know, and I haven't found any evidence of anyone checking this fact besides Hoff Sommers. The fact should really weigh heavily on the reader, because what this means is that more than likely millions of people read this horrendous statistics from reputable publications and believed it. Not only that, but scores of journalists, perhaps many more than that, perhaps hundreds, just took the statement at face value without any checking at all. Why would they do this for such a defamatory claim? Because if this were true, then this would obviously imply that there was a gross epidemic of spousal abuse of pregnant women in the nation, and obviously it would be the male partners and husbands doing the abusing. The corollary, of course, is that men in general are bastards. In other words, reporting this falsehood grossly slandered the reputations of men. This violates all principles of journalistic integrity, and yet most people don't even know that this happened. Now, another small factoid that I do believe that this and the next one that I'm going to read from, which is also from the same book, also made it into textbooks used in gender studies programs in universities. And you all can maybe check for yourselves. But if my memory serves me correct, in the second edition of Who Stole Feminism, that I think came out in 2002 or 2005, the revised edition, I think I might have seen this in an article or an interview that Hoff Sommers did, that she had tried again to bring these bad stats to the attention of the publishers of these textbooks, and she had little to no success, that they still ran them. So ask yourself, are these people this dumb? Harvard, just really let it sink in what I just read to you there, right? A Harvard academic allows this to go viral? That she just misquoted somebody? I'm not buying it. Okay, so as I said, this is from the same book, and once again, this is another summary that I did from the same essay that I did, that I kind of break it down and then have some of my analysis at the end. In 1993 as well, it was also reported in many major mainstream news outlets that emergency rooms across the country saw up to a 40% rise in domestic battery incidents on Super Bowl Sunday. Nancy Isaac, another Harvard scholar, told the Boston Globe, "It's a day for men to revel in their maleness, and unfortunately, for a lot of men, that includes being violent toward women if they want to be." There was only one journalist in the whole nation that was skeptical of this fact, so he did some fact-checking. His name was Ken Ringel of the Washington Post. To make a long story short, he found that this story had no basis in fact whatsoever. You can read all the details of how this was confirmed in Hoff Sommers' book. Here I go on to extrapolate a little bit. You may be under the impression that this was reported as though it was something as innocuous as a weather forecast. This wasn't the case in the least. From this reporting, there was a flurry of activity by women's groups to lend great credibility to this claim. For example, there was a news conference beforehand at the site of the Super Bowl that year, held by a coalition of said groups. At the conference, they told reporters that Super Bowl Sunday is the biggest day of violence against women during the year, and that they had evidence to prove it. One group had a mailing campaign to at-risk women telling them not to remain at home with him during the game. There was an appearance on Good Morning America by Lenore Walker, a Denver psychologist and author of The Battered Woman, claiming to have compiled a 10-year record showing a sharp increase in violent incidents against women on game day. These are just a few examples of the fallout from the reporting of this non-fact. In the end, no study or any statistics could be provided by any of the groups or individuals that were speaking publicly about this claim. And to my knowledge, no one was sanctioned for this slander as well. So, I mean, it's just a repeat of the last one. You can stand up on Super Bowl Sunday and you have the whole country, millions of people that are watching this, men and women both, that aren't saying, doesn't that just say everything right there? That they aren't saying, wow, how many people were actually saying, geez, is that true? Is that really true? How many guys do I know that are beating the hell out of their wives on Super Bowl Sunday? Or everybody just takes it at face value. And if in the early 1990s, if everybody was just taking it at face value, which I think basically it was, or if they don't take it at face value, if they do think, that's probably BS, they don't speak up about it at all, and then why wouldn't they speak up about it at all? Because they're intimidated. Because everybody does innately understand there is an agenda going on. And to think that if you had your young adult daughters and sons, it wouldn't really matter, more impacting on the daughters, to consume and internalize these type of messages like the last two that I've just given here, and not to be severely alarmed and say, whoa, how is this happening? Is this true? Is this true? And if it is true, then geez, maybe we need to really throw our weight behind it. Because let's be honest, how many people do you really know that besides donating to something or giving a verbal platitude, if this were the state of affairs in these two examples that I just laid out, that men being violent to women was this bad, and we know it's not because of the stats that we just saw at the beginning of this video revealed by the Red Pill documentary of almost equal levels of domestic partner violence. But if it were that bad, isn't it just completely, it's beyond belief that there wouldn't be mass participation of people doing something about it. Everybody's bought into a complete nefarious lie, and they're either way too intimidated to speak about it, way too useless, stupid, or incompetent to do anything about it, or they believe it. They believe it. And unfortunately, I think that's my point of doing these videos, is that probably the lion's share believe this BS. And it's got to be undone. It's got to be undone. If we're going to have any future that resembles any type of health in our society. Maybe we won't get there, but I tell you what, it's not acceptable to me. It's not acceptable. I'm going to keep screaming in the wind about it as long as I can. And I hope you will all too if you agree and find this type of material enlightening. But I'll leave it there today, and I'll see you in the next one.